Hey guys, Kate here, host of the Primitive Podcast. On today's episode, we have Dave Marcinkowski. Dave's the CEO and one of the partners of Madera Residential, and they're apartment developers. They buy and flip apartments. Been doing it a long time, highly successful. Have built a great company, almost 400 employees. And one of the cool things about Dave and his partners is they've done it together. You hear a lot of horror stories about business partnerships, but I think you'll hear in this podcast, in this episode, that Dave and them have done it really well, and it's really benefited their company. And so I think you'll learn a lot from them in that, and you'll really enjoy this episode. Really appreciate you being here, Dave. It's been fun over the last several years getting to know you. I think we've worked together since December of 2017. So we've had the privilege of getting to know you that long. Of course, my nephew Rylan and your son Ben are good friends, and so we've known each other through that for a long time. And so it's really great for me to have you on our podcast, and can't wait to learn from you, this morning. So for those who don't know who Dave Marcinkowski is, say Marcinkowski fast 10 times. I dare you.
Yeah.
Tell us where you're from. Tell us a little bit about your family. And I'd love for you to share with people who Madera is and, how you guys started and what you do and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's not a lot of Marcinkowskis in Lubbock.
Not a lot.
No. So that kind of gives away where I came from. So I was born just north of Detroit, Michigan. I lived there for 26 years. Okay. So I went to college in Michigan, small Division III school in Michigan, got to play basketball at. Got into the industry kind of happenstance. My master plan out of college would be a professional caddy. For circumstances that would take too long.
Hold on. You wanted to be a professional caddy?
Yeah.
You would have unequivocally been the largest caddy in the game.
No, there's some big caddies out there. Yeah, I started caddying when I was 11 years old at a country club called Oakland Hills Country Club, and they've hosted U.S. Opens, PGA Championships, Ryder Cup about 15 years ago.
Oh my gosh!
And
that's
so
cool.
I got to caddy for some pretty cool. I mean, it was like the place in the Detroit area is Oakland Hills, and I've caddied in like some championships. And
that's really cool. This is fun. I didn't know this about you.
Yeah, and so my plan was, it's probably why I kind of screwed around in college a lot, was to be a professional caddy. I actually had a bag on the Florida tour, and a buddy of mine and I were going to go get an apartment, and we were going to go caddy. I think the Florida tour turned into like the Nike tour, which turned into whatever it is called now. But my buddy, like a week before, called me and said, man, my parents give me so much hard time about this caddy thing, and I got this college education. He's like, I'm going to bail on you. And so I chickened out and needed a job really quick. And so I went to work for a temp agency and got put at an apartment management company, family-owned deal called Ed Rose & Sons in Detroit as a bookkeeper. And that's where I got in the industry that I am in right now. I never left it.
Awesome. Okay.
And so I did that for 3 or 4 years. It was a family-run company, and I was not in the family, so I had a ceiling that I had hit there. And I actually got, again, too long for a podcast of this length, but I ended up basically taking a job in Chicago for a guy that became my mentor, a company called Marquette Management, and I moved to Chicago in like 4 days.
Wow.
So I interviewed with him, and he offered me the job on a Thursday, and I moved there that weekend and started that Monday as their director of training. And so I spent the first probably 5 or 6 years with them, really training everybody from leasing agents to maintenance to, I'm not a handyman, but I would train people on systems and things like that, managers. And then I kind of progressed to where I ran their leadership team my last 3 years. Same kind of deal though. I wasn't I take that back. The reason I came down to Lubbock is my wife is from Lubbock.
Okay.
And so Laura and I met at a wedding in Fort Worth.
Okay.
Her coworker she was teaching at the time married my sweet maiden college. And so we dated long distance for a while, and then we got married, and she came up to Chicago to go to pharmacy school. And when she got done with pharmacy school, she wanted to move back to Texas, and we were blessed to make our way back to Lubbock. It was the last place we thought we'd end up.
So what was that like? Like she shows up and says, "You're coming with me to Lubbock, Texas."
Well, yeah. It's the day after I had met her, I did the kiss of death. I told her I would never move to Texas, and so it was inevitable for me. God was laughing, and you're going to Texas. Great. So So I was totally cool. I didn't have any, my brother lived in Chicago. I didn't have any ties to Chicago, so I was totally cool moving to Texas. And we would come down for the holidays. And Laura's family is close friends with the Stells, Paul Stell.
Okay.
And so Paul and I we met at like a Christmas, we had met before, but we started talking at a Christmas deal. And his company, Stell and Young, which his partner was Charlie Young at the time, was growing, and they needed some operational help. And so I came down here as a third partner with them.
Okay.
And the three of us were together for a couple of years. Paul was really into building Vintage Township on the south side of town, which is an amazing development. But Charlie and I are apartment guys. We're not home builders.
Right.
And so Paul was feeling a pull that way, and we wanted to stay on the apartment side. And blessed, and Paul was very kind to allow the two of us to buy him out. And Charlie and I started what's now called Charlie and I. And then there was somebody else who was working for Paul named Gary Hall at the time. The three of us got together and formed Madera Residential.
That's awesome. And so when was this?
This was 2007-ish.
Okay. All right. That's awesome. Okay, so tell people what Madera is, what you do, and
so
how
we're
it works,
in apartments.
And a little bit about the work.
We currently own about 13,000 apartment units, probably about 50 or so properties. We manage for other people probably another 1,000 units, so we're about 14,000 units. We bought our first deal together in 2008. And
perfect timing.
Yeah, it was wonderful. We got it was in Baytown, Texas. We had Hurricane Ike hit that was in July of 2008. We had Hurricane Ike hit in September of 2008, and then we had the financial crisis in October of 2008.
Wow. Tell me about that. I mean, like that's a lot to endure. You know, you're starting this new business, and you certainly know the industry, but the business itself is new. You have new partners. You guys are all getting into this. You purchase your first property, and you get hit by a hurricane and the financial crisis of 2008. What's going through your mind? You're like, what did we do? I mean,
it was in Baytown, Texas, which quite frankly was like the twilight zone. We weren't cocky, but we really thought we knew how to manage apartments. We thought we could do anything, and we were thrown things we had never considered before. And it was one of those deals where we had to pull ourselves up in the bootstraps and focus on that deal. We've been told that we were like, that property was one of two deals that didn't go back to the bank that was bought in the summer of 2008 in the Houston area.
Wow.
But we endured. We had some amazing limited partners that were very patient with us, who understood the times and understood the situation to allow us to kind of fight through it. I mean, everything and anything, it was Murphy's Law. I mean, it was absolute Murphy's Law. Anything that could go wrong went wrong. For a couple of years, and we had to fight through that, and we learned a lot about each other as partners. Yeah. We learned a lot about our organization and how to properly run things. Like, we thought we had it figured out, but at the end of the day, those challenges allowed us to really kind of hone our skills. And not that we're perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it required something different of us that we didn't realize until we got into it. The great news is we came out of that deal and bought our second deal with those same investors in April of 2010, and we've been kind of off to the races ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that deal, so everybody, where does Madera come from? That deal, it was called Baker Downs. It had 2 small ponds on it and a bunch of trees. And so we named it Lakes at Madera, which Madera is Spanish for wood. And that's where Madera came from. It was the first deal we ever bought together.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I'm going to come jumping ahead on my questions here, but when you think about failure, as you built this company over the years, and we think of that experience specifically, where you're just, it wasn't so much a failure as much as it was a significant challenge. But how have you guys approached failure? How do you approach failure as a leader? Whether it's in 2008, in terms of what you learned from that and how that you apply that to your leadership now, or maybe it's some other level of failure or experience of failure. How do you approach it?
That deal in particular, because we were still managing for other people, and we had challenge. We're managing for other people, and that's always a challenge because they have different expectations and that you have to kind of adapt your systems to. But like that particular deal for those 2 years, it was totally reactionary. I mean, looking back, it was awful. I mean, enduring it was awful. Now I look back and said it was the absolute best thing that could have happened to us at the perfect time. It really galvanized us as partners. It galvanized us as an organization. It's easy to sit there and look at challenges now that we've fought through that battle, and kind of their failure is now an opportunity.
Right.
Where I think if you kind of just go by the buzzwords of failure as an opportunity and you don't actually experience it, you don't really understand what that means.
Yeah,
and we understand what that means.
Yeah, that's amazing. So there are 4 main partners at Madera?
Yep.
Okay, so what does the kind of leadership structure look like, and how do you view your leadership? Like what do you feel like your responsibility at Madera is for your almost 400 employees?
Yeah. So the 4 of us have completely different disciplines. My partner, Gary Hall, has got a construction background, and so we do value-add apartments. We do a lot of renovation work, and Gary oversees that side of things. Charlie has a lot of operational skills. He's very gifted in that area, but he's very good at assessing markets and apartments as well as relationships. And so he helps raise equity with limited partners, but he really helps identify deals and cast vision for how we're going to create value on those deals to make them successful. Alton has got a financial background, Alton Smith, and he really is the guy behind the curtain who makes all these deals happen. It's interesting. There's so many moving parts in those things, and Alton has got a team that really has that figured out. And he helps as well in fundraising. I mean, we do cross each other on a lot of levels, but we also understand and respect each other's disciplines.
That's really cool.
And so my deal, I'm the day-to-day operations guy. And so I handle, everything from that standpoint. Charlie helps a lot with that, especially as far as performance goes and things like that. But the folks that work with, I work with the leadership team that really helps run the properties.
So how do you view your responsibility? When you think of your leadership team, when you think of your almost 400 employees, when you show up to work, what responsibility do you feel like in terms of the value you need to bring them and how you need to lead them? I mean, how do you approach your role as the leader?
Yeah, I think from, when we were just the one property, even like the first, let's say 15 or 20 properties, I was on property every week. Especially Lakes of Madera. I mean, I was down there, I think I was down there 4 days after. Charlie was down there during the hurricane. I was down there like 4 days after the hurricane and camped out. We had an apartment and we were there every single day. And so decision making was, we made the decisions. We had managers and staff that worked for us, but we were totally engulfed into it. The challenges we've scaled up has been letting go of that and hiring and developing the team to allow you to do that kind of scaling. And so that's the area that I've probably focused on the most is, casting vision, hiring other leaders that can then hire teams. I'm a big fan of, anything that you take on, you need to have a champion for, and that champion can't just be you. If you're a leader, you need to be the one casting the vision for that, and you need to have somebody who can live and eat and breathe that vision and make it a reality. And so I spend the majority of my time now with the leadership team, which has been challenging because, our on-site staff became used to seeing me, and they don't anymore. Right. They'll see me at Christmas parties and they'll see me at some different things. I try to do, emails and various ways to be able to connect with a group, but the individual handshakes and knowing what everything was going on in people's lives just doesn't exist anymore. It was hard for me. I think it's been hard for us as an organization, but the reality of it is like that's, if you're not growing, you're dying, and we love what we do. We have a very clear vision of 10 times who we are, and when you can look at that, and it's not just to grow. We really feel like we're doing something that's impactful. We feel like we're helping people out. It's easy to get passionate about that, and so that's I read something recently that talked about it's casting vision. Leadership is at the partner level is casting vision. It's hiring other leaders and developing those leaders, and it's making sure there's money to do the projects you're wanting to do.
Yeah, that's really good.
And I think that's probably where I spend 80%, 90% of my time.
Yeah, that's great. So practically speaking, when you talk about vision, and practically speaking, when you talk about leading and empowering the leaders that you're leading, what does that look like? How much time do you spend casting vision? In what ways do you cast vision? How much time do you share with your leaders, and what does like leading the leaders look like, practically speaking for you? Yeah,
I mean, it really is getting away from your desk. It is easy for me or anybody to sit down and get stuck returning emails and sitting on phone calls and getting demos or having a vendor call me up. And I go to extraordinary lengths, right, wrong, or indifferent, to avoid all of that. I try to be email zero every day. I don't usually get there, but I get pretty darn close. And what I'll do is I'll do that first thing in the morning, and then I don't look at it again. I mean, if I go to lunch and I'm having something to eat, I may look at it, but nothing. I don't let that control me. And when you get away from your desk and you start to walk around and you interact with your leaders, I think that is if you don't do anything else, that is the most important thing, is to have that kind of relationship with them where you can listen to the challenges that they're facing. You can step away and then come back to them and say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you considered this? What if we do this? At the same time, you're helping to inspire them and reinforce that vision of where we're trying to go. I can't tell you how many meetings I go into in which, I feel going into it, everybody's on the same page, everybody gets where we're going, and I couldn't be more wrong. And, I've had to get better at, one, listening, but then two, being able to bring people back to center and say, let's remember why we're doing this. Let's remember where we're going. And, usually, if you do that and you do that consistently, people start to buy into it. I think that's where culture comes from.
That's really good. Thanks for sharing that insight. How do you approach your own personal growth? You have all these responsibilities, you're leading leaders, you have employees, you have stakeholders and investors, you have partners that you're answering to and working with, you have properties, practically speaking. So how does Dave focus on Dave, and what does that look like?
I think there's a few different ways that I do that. In the most simplistic form, I like to read. I'm not, I'll listen to BlinkList books. And if I like a book, I may try to listen to it, especially if I've got a long drive. If you know what BlinkList is, it's basically a 30-minute, Cliff Note version of a book being read to you. So you can go through a lot of books really fast. And then I like Flipboard. And so I've got my Flipboard kind of set up to where it knows all the things that I like. And so I get inundated every day with articles I can just flip through. And if I find one I like, I read it. Also, for me, it's about, you have to invest in that. And so there's some communities that I'm a part of that I go to extraordinary lengths to make sure that I stay connected with. One's Abundance 360, a Peter Diamandis group that Charlie got me connected with, that is a very technology forward driven group that has really inspired me to really ask a lot of cool questions and really challenge the status quo. And the third thing for me is volunteer work. So I learned very early on, and I love volunteer work. And my passion is probably more on associations. So I've been president of the Texas Department Association. I've been president of Lubbock. I'm actively involved at the national level. I'm dialing that back now. I'm getting more involved in our local chamber. But I find that it helps me stay informed with what's going on in our industry or what's going on in the business world. But more importantly, it allows me to network with other leaders. And that's the one thing that was missing in a lot of spaces. You just can't sit down and read and think you're going to be able to really learn what challenges are out there. You need to hear from other people who are going through similar experiences or experience maybe you haven't experienced yet, but very well could. And to know that I can pick up a phone, and I've now probably got a Rolodex of fellow volunteers of, hundreds that I can call upon. And it's interesting in that environment with the volunteer side, especially in the apartment industry, we are competitors, and sometimes fierce competitors. But the folks that I'm friends with, and I haven't really met very many people who don't fall into this box. We all believe one thing, which is if I've got a property and I would rather have a person next to me who is actively involved and has the same views and values as I do, and we can all succeed when that happens, versus this just, it's me against you kind of thing.
Yeah, dog eat dog.
Yeah, and I go on trips with competitors. I've got really good friends that we're fighting for the same deal, who, I'll get some pretty random fun hate texts throughout the time when we get something that they didn't get or we're doing something. But at the same time, if we do something operationally or I see something operationally, I know I can call them or they can call me, and it's like, hey, I'll open up the vault for you. This isn't the secret sauce isn't what people really think it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. How do you balance, work and, growing this company and all the aspirations you have with your family?
Yeah.
What does that look like? And when you find yourself out of balance, I'm really curious what you do specifically to kind of help yourself come back to the middle.
Yeah. I used to travel a lot because I thought I had to travel. I thought I had to be on site. And I had to go through kind of a hard time accepting the fact that and learn a lot about myself. That wasn't me. I now take, one thing, our most valuable asset is our time. And I take that very seriously. And I say no a lot. I used to not say no at all. I used to be very codependent upon, vendors. I mean, the vendor community in our industry must think that I'm the biggest goofball ever, because I used to be yes, 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 and now I'm like, absolutely not. And I delete emails from them as fast as they come in. I never return voicemails. And it's interesting. Even our folks that work for us, I get a lot of emails from our folks, and I tell our people, don't send me a thank you email. I don't want to thank. I mean, I have to open that email up. I have to look at it. I have to consider for a second, do I need to reply to it? I may even feel guilty because I've gotten it. I know I'm not going to reply to it. So just don't bother sending me a thank you email. And so I use a product called Unroll.me that allows me to basically push emails that I get that are probably more junk mail or somewhere between junk mail and relevant into a single email that I can get a day if I ever want to go back. But it's basically an archive tool that like I told you, I try to stay email zero. This is terrible to say, especially on a podcast, but good luck trying to find me in our phone system. You're just not going to find me. And that's not an arrogant thing. That's a reality. If you want to have a balance in your home life, you have to learn how to say yes and how to say no. And I've been blessed with enough opportunities on both sides to learn the lesson and take that very seriously.
Oh, that's really good. Thanks for sharing that. It's good insight. Getting all kinds of great tools. We'll have to make sure to add a lot of those in the show notes so people can easily find them. I'm going to check out BlinkList. That's new to me.
BlinkList. I think it's
BlinkList.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's great. A couple more questions for you. What have been the biggest personal influences in your own leadership journey? Whether it's an author, or whether it's an individual, whether it's a mentor, maybe it's a combo of those things. Just curious at who that has been or what that's been, and what are some of the big takeaways that you've learned.
Well, I've got great partners who I respect deeply, and they definitely inspire me every day with what we're doing. I have a tendency to be the one who thinks like way out there. And it's easy to have partners who are like, what is wrong with you? We don't have time for that. We don't have the money for that. We don't have this or that. And my partners have allowed me the freedom to kind of be me, which is critical. I've also been extremely blessed with great mentors. I mean, even from the time that I was in high school, I can remember people who were a part of my life that helped guide me into who I think I am today. I've got an amazing family, an amazing wife. The same kind of deal. I mean, I had to figure out who I was, but I also needed to have the environment to be able to be me. And I think those relationships are what kind of drives that for me.
That's great. You've mentioned, partners a lot, because you have 3 of them. And so you run this big company with, 3 partners. What does partnership look like for you guys? I mean, you hear a lot of horror stories of business partnerships, and it doesn't seem like that's been the case for you. And certainly I'm certain there have been challenges. But what have you learned about partnership, and how have you guys really made it thrive and really work when a lot of stories you hear are kind of horror stories?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is like, I think each of us has to understand what it is we want to do, what we're willing to do, and what we're not willing to do. And as long as that fits together, and as long as we each understand that, the relationship can thrive, and then it becomes collaborative, and then it becomes fun. I bring up my 3 partners because they're easy ones to do, or my wife is an amazing partner. But we really value relationships in Madera. And so we have a lot of collaborative partnerships. A lot of people probably take stock in, I know a lot of friends of mine who kind of like treat their organizations like a little black box that they have to protect at all costs. We've been open book since day one, and we'll tell vendors, if we believe there's a reason for us to consider having a collaborative partnership, we will be an open book with folks. And I think that's critical as it relates to a relationship at a partnership level. And that's what I see with my partners. It's when you sit there and you have silos and you draw lines in sand, or you aren't willing to say, this is what I'm willing to do and this is what I like to do. And you sort of sell that out for what maybe somebody else wants to. I can tell you there's always space to be able to find common ground, but you have to have a relationship with somebody where you can sit down and be like, dude, I don't want to do that. Here's why. And, and at the end of the day, what could happen is like, if that's your deal and I can see the vision for where you're trying to go, you don't need me. I mean, each of us needs each other because we're great together, but at the same time, they don't need to call me up and go, hey, Dave, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? There's such a level of trust between us. And it wasn't always that way. It's earned That's always earned. It's
something you grow into.
Something you grow into. But at the point now, it's one of those deals where I can make a decision, and I will 99.9% of the time then go back to my partners and say, hey, this is what I decided. This is why. And they may or may not agree with me every time, but it's one in which it's a respectful conversation when they don't. At the same time, I don't have to sit there and stop and go, man, I got to get everybody together. I got to call time out. Business world today with technology is going so incredibly fast. If you are not nimble, if you do not have those kind of relationships, you will get destroyed.
Yeah,
that's
so
why
true.
I think the garage groups that are out there that are coming up with ideas that are nobody knows about are going to could honestly take out a monster, because I see it as we grow. The more you grow, the more you scale, the more that becomes a challenge. It can be managed, it can be dealt with, and we are getting really good at that. But I mean, we get exposed to some bigger companies, especially in our industry, and I mean, it's almost like they're dinosaurs, and you can see it.
Yeah, I'd lost all the ability to move, nimble, like you're talking about.
Yeah, well, they don't even see that as a value.
Right, which is
we've got it right, and we're going to keep doing it this way always.
Major disruption. Yeah, it's good. All right, last question for you. If you could go back to when you're 25, 30 years old, what would the Dave now, all the things you've learned, all the insight you've gained, all the successes and the failures, what would you tell your kind of 30-year-old self? What advice would you give you the 30-year-old Dave Marcinkowski?
I'm going to answer that in two parts. The first part I'm going to say is I think about that every once in a while. You have a hard time. I try to focus as much time as I can on where we're going, not where I've been, but it's critical to remember where you've been. It would be easy for me to go back and look at all these different points in my life and say, man, I wish I didn't do that. I wish I could tell myself that was a bad choice. But then I sit back and I go, you know what? Then I wouldn't be who I am today.
Right.
And so, in a general sense, I don't have any regrets. And I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I've had some horror stories along the way. But I look at my past as who I am. And so, there isn't this sort of mindset of I need to go back and tell myself not to do this or whatnot. I think the thing for me that I would encourage myself, because where I've hit tumbling blocks is, like everybody, self-doubt. There have been plenty of times in my life where I knew the right answer, but I was able to talk myself out of it because of something. Usually something related to another person, relationship, where I was afraid I was going to hurt somebody, or I was going to say the wrong thing, or I was going to do those kinds of things. I would encourage myself to go with my gut every single time. And because I know deep down I mean well, and I care about the person, whoever that is, or the event. And if it's wrong, we'll fix it. There's nothing you can't, I tell people that I train all the time, there's nothing you can do that I can't fix, or we can't fix together.
Right.
And you got to believe that. And if you do that, I think it gives you a lot of courage to be able to step out and take risks, which, again, I think more so than ever, we have to be able to do.
Yeah, that's really great. Thanks for sharing all that. Well, again, we really appreciate you being with us today. I think everyone's going to really enjoy this episode, and,
cool.
And really appreciate your time.
Thanks, buddy.